sign up for emergency alerts. It's on page 3. It's boco911alert.com. The number Mike wants you to call when you do see hazards occurring during a flood event or high rain is 911. We want to know when you see damming happening or the water is slowing down and you think there might be a dam above you somewhere. Okay, the next part here, we're going to go into the hazard mitigation projects the county's identified to begin working on throughout unincorporated Boulder County. I want to make this really clear. It's in unincorporated Boulder County, not in Lyons, not in Jamestown. Those communities are doing their work already and have their own plans. And I want to just reiterate that the goal is by May 1st to complete all these actions. We don't have specific dates for all of them yet. If you sign up on our email list, as I said, on our homepage, we can start sending you those updates. And if you go to the resource page, the debris team, you'll see that on one of the contact information, is the team that will be providing updates about when and what and where we will be working on these projects. So I want to introduce Chris Taggart. He works for Michael Baker Associates Consulting. He's been the lead for us in the county to go out and conduct this assessment.
Process already, so I just want to talk through what was done and kind of what the end product is, and just emphasize again that there'll be an interactive session at the end to talk about in more detail some of the specifics of what's happening, but hopefully this background facilitates that a little bit. So what you see on screen here is a picture, maybe a little hard to see with the coloring in the back, but a picture of all the sites that were identified through the 3,000 data points that Gary mentioned at the beginning to need or require a site visit as part of this assessment process. So we did an online assessment that I'll walk through a little bit in the next slide to figure out what people were saying and what else needed to be done what needed to be looked at. And then we made this online assessment, and then we went out in the field and looked at everything. So this is part of the online assessment that shows a wide variety of stuff that we looked at. You can't see many of the things that are on this slide from probably where you are, but as Gary mentioned, all of the data points that were collected from the previous creek planning meetings, the transportation department within Boulder County went out and did an assessment of all damaged roads and culverts. There was an assessment of where we had right of entry or not right of entry. There's a lot of floodplain development permits and other permits that have come in. And the NRCS did walk all the streams as well. So we looked at all the field notes from what they did and came up with the 200 sites that you saw on the previous slide. So then we went through a process of determining what we could include in the implementation plans for May. So I'm going to read a little bit from this slide because I think it's useful. So if woody debris is identified to have a high risk of causing damming or blocking culverts and bridges, which Mike was alluding to before. So that's the imminent threat debris, woody debris that we're looking at. Deposition of sediment will cause flooding. Mike mentioned that as well. We saw several areas, especially once we get down into the plains, or really any area that becomes flat, where a lot of the sediment dropped out and reduced the conveyance in that area. So that's an area that we're looking at. Culverts that have been washed out and need replacement. A lot of the culverts that did get washed out were along the road system and got replaced as part of rebuilding those roads, but there are still a handful that need to be addressed. Bank erosion or avulsions will not handle the creek flow or cause flooding. In the more extreme erosion events, this has happened really throughout the whole system. And a lot of the areas where an avulsion or a lot of bank erosion occurred in the immediate vicinity of a home, those homeowners have probably been in contact with the NRCS program, because that program will come out and provide some bank stabilization or some berm construction to protect those homes that are in imminent danger, and then if home is in imminent danger of being impacted by spring runoff. So we had 7 hazard mitigation project types that we identified. Bank stabilization for those areas with extreme erosion. A lot of the bank stabilization projects within the county are being handled through the design work that the NRCS is doing. Debris removal, especially in specific woody debris removal, exists throughout the county. So a lot of the sites that you saw identify those woody debris removal sites. Berm construction is similar to a bank stabilization project where because of an avulsion or some other erosion that's occurred, there is literally no more protection for that home. It's been eroded away, or a home is newly jeopardized by the new stream location. So a berm needs to be constructed to prevent or protect from spring runoff. Restore conveyances, all those areas where we have sediment deposition. Stream redesign and realignment. The stream moved extensively throughout the whole system during this event. There are some locations where that was so extensive that a stream alignment project needs to be completed. The handful of culvert replacements that I mentioned, and there's a lot of homes that we're calling high hazard homes. Some homes are in the creek still, some are partially in the creek, or are no longer habitable. So there needs to be a plan for addressing those homes as well. So what's excluded from the scope? So I think talking through what's in the scope and what's out of the scope will help a little bit when we start to talk about the details on the maps that are out there. The immediate focus is to protect life, property, and public infrastructure from spring runoff. So that really is the driver for a lot of what can be done by May and what will be done after May. The damage was extensive. In some locations, the frequency of the event was over a 500-year event. So there's woody debris and feet of sediment in people's homes, but well out of the floodplain and well out of that spring runoff area. So we're really focusing on that spring runoff threat. Conditions in excess of those high hazards are excluded. That unsightly debris that is outside of the spring runoff zone is excluded, and then the mitigation projects that will be addressed after May 1st. So this is an example of what you'll see out in the lobby area when we're done. It's an implementation plan. It identifies all the projects that will be done along that reach. So that's what we've identified now. We've said that we looked through a lot of data in the process of putting these plans together, so it's pretty comprehensive. Of course, there could be things that exist out there that we still need to take into account. So part of this is still a dialogue, but it gives you a good idea of where we're headed and the kind of things that we're looking at moving forward. So I think this serves as a good introduction to maybe some good dialogue later.
So we'll go get into question and answers, but I want to just talk about the next slide because this is a key piece here. It's you. We can't do any work unless you give us permission to do so. I know many of you have seen these permission forms, and I know some of you have some pretty strong reactions to these permission forms. How many of you have had strong reaction to that permission form? Yeah. Well, we apologize for that, but unfortunately we are beholden to that form because if we're eligible for FEMA funding from the federal government, we have to have a hold harmless clause, we have to have limited liability, all that. So that language, unfortunately, is ironclad and we can't do anything about it. The other piece of it is what we learned after the 4 Mile Canyon fire is if we, this recovery is going to take years. So we may be doing these types of activities multiple years. So we don't want to have to come back year after year and try to gather permissions from everyone if we need to do work. So that's why the time span is longer. So we understand and respect your need to take care of what's yours and your private property, but in order to do this work, we need your permission. And we have permission forms in the lobby. We also have a map on a laptop that can show you if your area, your property we need a permission to do the work. And just also to think about is none of us live in an isolated area, and especially when you live in a creek. There's people above you and there's people below you. We're all in this together, we're all connected. What you do on your property affects people downstream. So take that in mind when you are signing that form to do some mitigation work, that you're also doing it for the larger community. So